So we're on a road trip, and it's going about how you'd expect a road trip to go. We've got the deck over trailer hooked up, so we're going to pick up, well, as you can imagine, another Facebook Marketplace find up north of Seattle. So problem is I had a headlight out, so I stopped at Napa here to change it, and we are now on bulb number 3, trying to find the right one. For some reason, what pulls up in their thing isn't this truck, so I've got the old one pulled out. We matched it up. They gave me one. It didn't turn on, so hopefully the new one turns on and there's not something else going on. Okay, go check. Okay, you can't see, but I just went and turned the lights on, and it's on, so we can now put all this back together. Now, Chrysler and electrical are two words you never want to hear in the same sentence, and this truck has the dumbest headlight design ever. To get this all out, to change that bulb, which you would think you'd just be able to like go in there and do from the back side, you got to pull out the bolt here, but the grill blocks that bolt, and then you got to pull out a bolt way down here, but again, even with that out of the way, it's blocked from a straight line, so even with a bunch of extensions, you can't get your socket straight onto either bolt. Then you got to come under the fender well and open up a little trap door and go up in there to release a little clip. Oh, here, this clip, but you have to release this clip from the trap door in here, and then you've got a whole bunch of little 8mm bolts to pull the cover off to get to your actual lights. It's dumb, but we have got the light working, so we're going to try to put all this back together. And I have a 10mm socket for those other stupid bolts, but I don't have an 8mm for these, so I'm using a little Leatherman here, and it's not ideal. So I'm going to do this, and then that one doesn't want to go in there, and then we'll see what we do. Okay, back cap's on, so now we can put this whole thing back in here. We've got to get that socket into that hole, get that to line up with that, and then get this clip to grab this. And where it gets even more stupider is this doesn't fit in that space. See, so you've got to, hold on, you've got to bring this out here, get that under there, and this, I guess once you hit it, it goes. Okay, it's kind of in there. Now we gotta see, can you see where that bolt goes down there? Because I can't, and I got to get it down there. So that one, then the clip, and then try to get that one all the way in the bottom. You see how dumb this is? That's as straight as you can get the ratchet, because someone can't do math. Okay, so I fought that up and down bolt for like, oh, I forgot my trap door. I gotta shut. Anyway, I fought that bolt for like 15 minutes and realized I'm not getting it without like some different tool to hold it and put it down in there, keep dropping it out. So we're just not gonna worry about that one right now, and I'll deal with it when I'm home and have more tools. The headlight between that one there and the lock back there, it's in there. So we are going to, we're just shy of Portland right now. We are going to head over, cross the river into Washington, and then north up past Seattle to Monroe, Washington, to go pick up our prize for the day. And then we got to get it back home and show you what we use it for, because this is actually a very useful thing that I'm buying this time, which is different and strange. So yeah, I'll show you what it is when we get it and how it works when we get back. I should probably clarify that the reason it took 3 tries to get the right bulb is, number one, I went in, I told them what my truck was, they gave me a bulb, I came out, I went to put it in, it was wrong. So then I took the one out of my truck back in so they could match up the part number, and it was a Napa bulb, so Napa part number should be good. They did that, but they gave me a package that was already like taped back together and closed, and so I didn't have high hopes that it would work, and then it didn't. And so I went back in and they gave me a new one, and that worked. So that's why it took 3 tries. But yeah. So we're up north of Seattle in Washington, and it is not raining, which is incredibly strange to me, but they tell me that sometimes this happens here. So what we got, we have a single axle Jeep. Some people call them a Joe Dog, some people call them a jump Jeep, single axle Jeep, whatever. This is an Aspen, as you can see right there, it says Aspen. Same year, same everything as my Aspen 9 axle. So it'll all match up to this perfectly. And what this is for, this hooks to the truck's kingpin right here, and then you slide the truck fifth wheel way up forward, and that puts the drives of the truck right here underneath this thing. And then on the trailer, the big neck, you flip it back and you hook the short kingpin to this fifth wheel here, and essentially now your truck is a tri-axle or tri-drive, not tri-drive because that doesn't drive. It's got 3 axles back here in the group, which gets you different weights depending on where you're at, and that's still long enough to load up the front axle on top of it. So what this will allow me to do is ditch my big tandem axle Jeep with that big long 14-foot spread and leave it at the yard when I have a bit lighter of a load, and then essentially convert my truck into a tri-axle truck to take that weight. Because I'll show you why when we're looking at the Jeep, of why that trailer, you can take the Jeep out, throws a whole bunch of extra weight up onto the drives of the truck, which is why you need another axle to help scale it out if you're in that weight range. But yeah, Aspen, same year, same setup as my other one. The other thing, these work. It's one thing it needs some bolts replaced, but we're gonna do that. These are like the fifth wheel ramps. See right up here, just like on the Cozad and all that stuff. And one thing this does is it makes the fifth wheel sit up a whole lot higher, which on the hydraulic neck trailer you just adjust the hydraulics. But with the Cozad, that should make it to where it gives enough lift on that front neck that I can raise the rear tower and actually pull that trailer loaded without the Jeep in front of that one as well. Which, having that steerable rear end without the Jeep in the front and still be able to get my height out of it would be freaking incredible for getting stuff into goofy places. And I think this is going to let me do that, but the main purpose of it is for that Aspen trailer, since that trailer is built to be run in so many different configurations, and this is a major part that helps you use those different configurations. So now we're gonna head back south. Hey, we're at Flying J in Tumwater, Washington, I think. I got some fuel, checked over this thing. Everything is staying nice and tight, doing exactly like it should. This thing does have a little sliding fifth wheel on the top, so you can adjust your weights on how it splits the truck. That's what these bolts hold that whole slider plate in. So I'm gonna replace all of those. It's got like brand new Falcon tires on it, which is really good. Good airbags on it. And then the other thing is it has, as you can see in there, it's got brand new brakes on it too. So that's all very, very good. We'll just self-adjusting slack adjusters. Check the hubs, actually that shows perfect oil level. Aluminum rims on the outside, looks like steel on the inside. So all's riding like it should. Gonna keep heading south. Okay, we just stopped here and got some Round Table pizza for dinner because I'm classy and got good taste. Fun fact, when we were looking at moving to Bend, we actually looked, because I really like Round Table, and made sure they had a Round Table. When I saw what they did, I'm like, okay, we can move here. Then we moved there, and then Round Table closed down, and I was super sad, but I got it now. Back over the river into Oregon with a nice sunset view. Okay, it is the next day, next afternoon actually, so we did an accident until this morning, some other things, so now we got to get this unloaded, hooked to a truck, see if it airs up, see if it does the brakes work and all the things it's supposed to do. So what I'm going to do is come over here, get the Zacklift fired up, get the Beast fired up, and we're going to use the Zacklift to lift that off the trailer, get it hooked up to the Beast, hook air and all to it, and make sure everything works. Now this poor truck here has been neglected and tossed to the side. It has hardly done anything, I think 2, maybe 3 things this entire year so far. It's pretty much done nothing but sit here in the yard. I feel bad for it, but still starts though. Next. So much beeping. All right. So yeah, that truck is basically just sat all year. It's hardly done a thing. I think only one of the jobs it's done, I think, this entire year has actually been, it's done, okay, one paying job this whole year. That's all that truck has done. Partly because this winter has been summer, and that takes away most of the work. And partly because I fired my two biggest customers I had for the heavy duty towing, which make up like 80% of the work I had for that truck. So it sucks to do, but the guy can only take so much, and sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. So that basically eliminated most of that work, but it had to be done either way. So that really sucks, because I really like running that setup, but there's just been no work for it. There have been a handful of calls. This is where it gets frustrating, is there's been a handful of calls, like I've been really wanting to go do something with that, and I get called for something to go do with that, and I can't do it because I'm busy doing something else, or I'm out of the area or something like that. But you can't sit around, do nothing, not bringing in any sort of income, hoping it comes in someday. So you hop in another truck and you go to work doing other type of stuff, and of course that's when you get the call for that now you can't go do because you're busy or off somewhere else. So that's been kind of how it's been going with that one, and why you haven't seen very much more of it. Trust me, I would love for you to see more of that truck working, because I really like working that truck, but this ain't how it's going right now, which is why I've got other equipment, other trucks doing other things, and keeping income rolling in elsewhere, because you can't just have everything based off of one. But enough of that, let's get back to this. I think I should probably pull this that way and back up here, back the Zacklift up to it from that side, and then bring the beast in backed up from that side. That would then be facing that way, lift, pull out, set, back in, couple. Okay, that makes sense. Let's do it. Okay, we've got it rigged up here. See how this works out. There we go. So obviously this is a detachable towing unit, and there's many other brands of detachable towing unit, and the guys who are like hardcore fans of the other brands like to say, well, I can do anything with mine that you can do with yours, and my response is always, okay, boom out. And that's funnier if you know that none of the other brands have a boom like this on it. Okay, so this is in the air, and I also know, and not the previous video, earlier in this video, yesterday, I said that some people call these a Joe dog. And that's true, some people do call it that. But that's also incorrect. They are not a Joe dog. A Joe dog is a specific brand of attachment that essentially turns a single axle tractor into a tandem axle tractor. So if this right here, just forget that axle exists. Say it's a single axle little tractor, the fifth wheel is right here. A Joe dog looks like a miniature version of that, but it hooks into the fifth wheel right here, and then it pins into the back of the frame right here. So it's one rigid piece and has a little axle right here to essentially make this, but only that axle drives and this one free rolls. The Joe dog is rigid on the back here. It doesn't free move up and down because it's pinned in down here, and it doesn't swing in the turns like a trailer. It's rigid and skids side to side like this tandem does. That's a Joe dog. This is an Aspen single axle jump Jeep, and it's called a jump Jeep because you jump it up on the back of the truck or up under the neck. I'll show you that in a minute here when we get out to the yard. Well, probably tomorrow for me, but in a minute for you when we get out to the yard and hook it to the big trailer and show how it works. So I got to pull this out, then we're going to lower that down and hook it to this. All right, well, there it is, all set up. And yes, I know this isn't a true jump Jeep because it doesn't have the rollers right here. Like the jump Jeep thing comes from, there's rollers that stick down off the bottom of the frame of it. Then when you slide your fifth wheel all the way up, catch your ramps and like piggyback the thing up onto the back of your truck and lift that off the ground so you run without it. This does not have those rollers, but I don't want one with those rollers, which is a kind of bonus to this one, because I can slide my fifth wheel all the way up and still be able to turn and not have those rollers hooked into the back of my ramps there. Because like I said, my truck, the fifth wheel goes way up here to the back of the truck, and that is to transfer 22,000 pounds onto my front axle while maxing out my drives at the same time. And yeah, this truck has spread drive axles on it. It's not a Canadian spread. It is a West Coast, California, Nevada, that type of spread, which in California, Nevada, this gets you 47,338 pounds on these two axles. And that Jeep reaches far enough way over to the front there to put 22,000 on the front and still allows it to turn like a Jeep should. Now you also see here the difference in fifth wheel height way up here compared to, well, that one would be down here. That's what I'm saying. I think with my steerable Kozad, that'll give me enough height in the front that I could pull it without its big Jeep in the front, and just having this setup pulling it can get into a whole lot more places when you really need to get goofy. So that extra fifth wheel height's a bonus. On the Aspen with its hydraulic neck, it doesn't matter because you adjust that neck's height all hydraulically. So it could be higher, it could be lower, it could be whatever, and you still adjust your deck height with the hydraulic, so it's kind of irrelevant. But that is it slid all the way in the front position. I'm going to measure this out real quick and see what our spread is. Let's go. My phone's ringing, hold on. Cascade Heavy Rescue. That's center? That's close enough to center. Let's go back to center of this axle is 7 foot 7 inches with it slid all the way up. Now if we get past 8 foot 6, which isn't that far back, in most states this can count as a separate group, which instead of being a triaxle, we would now be a 2 plus 1. And then we'll get our weights there, plus another 20,000 on this axle here. So if they'll give us 43, 46, whatever there, then we'll get an additional 20 here, put us at 63, 66 on this whole group. While still, because that was another foot we had to go back, so we come back a foot, we'll still be putting a ton of weight up front. So we'll probably be getting like 17, 18,000 up there, maybe a little more than 18. 40, let's just say Oregon-ish, I believe how it goes. 43 plus 20, that mass out to a lot of weight just on the truck right here. Okay, we stretched it out now. So now we're going to measure our new spacing all the way back. So now what we want to see is over 10 feet between the two, which I already know that it is, and I knew that it was before I bought it, but we're going to put the tape on it to show that it is. We are 12 feet, which makes this its completely own separate axle group in every state. And yes, now we're not putting any weight onto the front end, so we're leaving a lot of capacity up there unused. But this truck here is 15,000, just shy of 15,000 on the front axle, empty as it sits without any trailer hooked up, like just bobtail going on the road. It's really freaking heavy on the front end. So let's say your average sales, forget California's 22,000 stuff because California doesn't like these things anyway. Let's just say 20,000 on the front end is what you get. We're already 15, so we're only, by not sliding our fifth wheel up at all, which we could actually go up just a hair shy of 2 feet and still transfer weight up there and still have our 10-foot spread in there. but say 15,000, all we got here. We're transferring no weight up front. We're leaving 5,000 pounds of weight on the table, but we're gaining another 20,000 pounds of weight back here. So we're still a 15,000 pound net gain. But granted, that's with this heavy spec truck right here that has that big front axle. And really we could put this all the way up, use that, and then run this as a shorter 2+1 group in most states, or as just a tri group in some other states where it works better that way. But let's say you're not using it with this heavy front end truck, you're using it with your, I don't know, 2016 red Peterbilt 389 with 63-inch stand-up sleeper, 244-inch wheelbase, 14,600 pound front end, 46,000 pound rears with full lockers, 18 speed and a 600 horse Cummins, you know, just to say. You don't have any extra capacity to put up there anyway. You have to put it all on the back end. So using this with it slid back, the front end basically just has to stay what it is, empty. You get 46,000 pound here, and you just gained an extra 20,000 here without needing that big front end. You know, if you should happen to have a truck like that. Anyway, I'm going to slide this back up, and then not right now because it's over where my yard is, where the big trailers are at. It's super muddy when it's wet there, and I don't want to make a muddy mess, and it snowed today. So tomorrow, for me, we're gonna go hook this up to both of the big trailers and do some measuring and some showing how it works and what it does. And that's gonna happen right now for you. Okay, we're here at the yard and we're hooked up to the Aspen. We've got the other Aspen, now there's two Aspens. Unhooked here, you can see, I realized it doesn't have any landing gear, so I had to get a little creative and make it stay. So what we gotta do is we've got to set this deck on the ground so we can disconnect this Jeep, go park it out of the way, flip the neck back, hook up to that one and pull it back under, and then show you that configuration and how it works. So we've got to raise this, flip our feet out of the way and set it down, which is opening this, I believe, yep, bottom lever, see our feet come up. Oh man, I screwed up. Hold on, I need to hook our air supply back up. I disconnected it because we're disconnecting all this, but I need the air to flip those feet. So now we can go, yep, there they go. We will remove the shims. So see how that works? Those feet flip up and flip down, and that's what, when they flip up, now this can compress and lower this all the way to the ground. So we go down. All the way, you see now that can compress, and we go all the way to the ground. And then we keep holding this back until we start to lift the neck. There we go. So now we can close off our air supply, disconnect. So from the Jeep to the trailer, there's shut-off valves for both air supplies so that we can continue to supply air to the Jeep, release and run the Jeep brakes and air suspension without it leaking out as it tries to go back to the trailer. So now we're unhooked, we can pull the Jeep forward. Okay, Jeep's out. Now we got to see how this works. Those are tight, so we'll have to we'll have to move our neck a little. Do this one. Guess that doesn't need to be wide open the whole time. Bump it to get these pins loose. There's one out. Two out. We got to disconnect the hoses up here. This would have to sit somewhere to not get crunched, I believe. Either way, while we're up here, we'll put our kingpin in the hole. Okay, we're gonna flip that back carefully. I'm probably doing this part wrong. Making sure that hose doesn't pinch in there somewhere. Alright, we did it. So now we just flipped our neck back, and now we're a normal short neck that we can hook the truck directly to. Now let me shut this off for a sec. Okay, so we skipped ahead to the truck hooked up to show this configuration first. That way, once I hook the single axle Jeep back to this truck, I can just stay hooked to it for the rest of the day. But yeah, this is with the neck flip back. You can see now we're just hooked straight to the truck, and we have plenty of room to slide the fifth wheel up even farther and move the truck back up under here to help load that front axle. So this works out very, very well. And then you flip it forward, of course, to reach all the way up to the front of that Jeep and split the weight between the truck and the Jeep. But either way, this is now a 7-axle setup, and you can run it like this. We're a hell of a lot shorter, and if we go somewhere we want to deck the Jeep, this is the configuration we're going to be in. I think very rarely will I ever pull the booster off to fully shorten up, or I'll probably never pull it off to run as a 5-axle. But if you do want to pull the booster off, it is these two pins right here. Disconnect the air lines right there. Here's your landing gear for the booster, and that's basically it. That's all. The other thing you got to do is you would first raise the front of the deck up, and then right here there's this big cross member. Remember, this is an outer frame and an inner frame that hinge back there, and the inner frame is what all the axles are connected to, and the outer frame is what the deck's connected to. What's going on in here is basically that exact setup where the deck and the neck reach over and press down on a hinge point in the middle and then evenly distribute the load front to back. That's exactly what's happening here. See, reaches over to a hinge point right there, that big trunnion, and then it evenly distributes the load front to back, or front to back. This is all just a much, much more compact and low profile version of it, because it's not a steerable like that one, and it's a million years newer. So what you would do, you would raise this up to open that gap, and there's blocks that go in there, and then you set that back down on those blocks, and now this just set down on that, and it's putting all the weight right here. It is still connected to the trunnion back there, so the axle frame, which is this now, is connected there to that trunnion and then blocked right here. But essentially the weight is getting put right here, dead center of these axles, and that is now your rear pivot point, or rear support point of whatever weight you have on the deck. So from back here, I'll show you the problem with this setup and where that single axle Jeep comes in. Is let's eliminate that back there, and we go right here. We're a 5-axle setup. If we put the load, the center of mass of the load, dead center of that deck, that's the rear support point. The kingpin right there is the front support point. So if we put the load dead center, it's halfway between those 2 points. Half the weight goes up here onto the truck, half the weight goes back here onto the trailer. It's going to evenly load all these axles. Great, that works out perfect. But if we leave the booster attached, and now this is our configuration, if we put the load in the center, the rear support point is now actually back here. It just moved back from there to there. And well, when you move that point back, you just transferred a bunch more of that weight forward, because it's now closer to the front of this basically inverted teeter-totter we have here. And now you just overloaded the truck axles because you moved your rear support point back. And this is about to get really confusing, but a way to think about it is, you know those art sculptures, the mobiles, where they hang all the different things, and like 3 will hang off this side, a 1 off this side, and the different distances between the hinge points, the different hanging thing makes it all work out and be perfect. Well, these trailers and setups and all this are essentially an inverted version of a mobile, where the distance that reaches out and where it pushes spreads the weight between the two. If this was a 3-axle, 2-axle setup, that point would be closer to the 3-axle, so it loads more weight here, it evens out there. A whole bunch of engineers figured out all of this stuff and where it needs to sit to make it all work. But in this case of a 7-axle, obviously we can't put the weight right here anymore because we're going to overload these before we get to weight on these. So we would have to move the center point of the load back to get more of the weight to go back here and make all this load out evenly. But usually stuff that's so heavy you're hauling a trailer like this is so big that you don't have room to do that. So that's where that single axle Jeep comes in, that essentially turns this truck into a 4-axle tractor, or adds that extra axle if you slide your fifth wheel back and space it out enough. That gives you your 40 to 46,000 depending on your state you're in, plus another 20 behind that. And now your center point is still back here, so if you put the load in the center, you're still loading more weight forward, but you just added an extra 20,000 pounds of capacity up here, so you can do that. Now the same goes true if you do the opposite, where you take the booster off the back and run the Jeep in the front. Now your pivot point in the front changed to way out there with that flip neck, and you got to run your load very far forward to try to get it to load, because you'd have 5 axles up here and only 2 back here. And so you have to get the load as far forward, like way up on the neck, as far forward as possible to load those 5 before you overload those 2. It's like I said, if you picture that mobile setup, like the art thing and how it distributes the load, it starts to kind of make sense of, it's all a big balancing act, and the support points and balance points, it's just everything's inverted because you're pushing the weight down instead of hanging it. I hope that makes sense, but that's kind of how all this works. So like right now, if we loaded a whole bunch of weight right here, we're going to overload the truck before we load up this 4-axle group back here. Oh, and also I measured this configuration right here. We're 87 feet long, so we're under 90. The pilot car requirements for length in different states is very different. California, I believe it's 110, Oregon's 105, Utah 105, Nevada 110. There's some states it's all the way down to 90, but in this configuration we're under 90, so if we want to get home from somewhere without needing pilot cars, an empty permit's no big deal. I'll get an empty permit before I deal with stacking the booster, because you have to have a machine and help to stack the booster. The permit's cheaper than that. But we're under 90, so even the states that have the 90-foot limit for a pilot car, we're under that. And if we then do decide to stack the booster, we would be 74, so we're plenty short to get around anywhere. It's a big benefit of this trailer. We're legal width, well under legal weight, so we can stack both in every state, because there's some states that say, if you say you're 85,000 pounds total with the whole setup, they'll let you stack the Jeep, but you can't stack the booster because now you have multiple pieces on the trailer on an overweight, which isn't allowed, so they make you leave the booster hooked up. It's the same amount of weight going down the road. I don't get the logic in that, but some states are like that. But with this trailer, 68,000 total, we can stack both pieces legally and go wherever we want. So huge benefit. And if you're wondering why I didn't just get a 4-axle tractor to solve this problem, I'll explain that as well, because there's a couple huge benefits to just having a tandem, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. Geez, Casey, it's a lot of talking about your trailers instead of using them. Yeah, welcome to life with big trailers. You spend far more time working on them, maintaining them, configuring them, reconfiguring them, everything else that goes on with running them than you do actually hauling something with them. The vast majority of stuff you will do with big trailers, if you own them, is not weight. Not the vast majority. The vast minority, the least amount of time you spend with your big trailers will be actually hauling stuff with them. There's a whole lot more that goes into it, like work, aside from it. So you're seeing a lot of the working side, the configuring side, the measuring, reconfiguring, maintenance side. That's most of what you do with big trailers. So welcome to real life. And now we have 8 axles. So we put the Jeep in, you flip the neck back out to be able to reach far enough forward on the Jeep. I'll show you up here. This Jeep has a sliding fifth wheel in it, which the reason some of these bolts are missing is the guy I bought it from was gonna, I believe, take all this out and use this slider for something else, but it didn't get very far before he decided to sell it. So now I have it and I gotta put the bolts back in. But this slides back and forth in here to change how much it distributes the weight from the Jeep axle to the truck axle. So if you don't have a big front end, you want less weight transferred forward because this is all you got, you move this back some. Like I said, it's that whole balancing act, just like that, those mobiles. And we've got it put way forward. We've also got our fifth wheel of the truck slid all the way forward. So now this reaches all the way over and presses down right there. And then most of the weight, since you see we're so much closer to that point than we are at that point, most of the weight is going to go onto the truck. So it's pushing down right there. It's going to spread the weight some there, some here. Obviously, most of it is coming back here. We have the most capacity. Up there, in most states, say 20,000 front axle, we have 5,000 pounds of extra capacity up there since I'm 15 empty. So we obviously wanted to put less up there and more back here. So you see, it is exactly like that little art sculpture I told you about. Comes here, comes down, splits some there, which then splits to there. It's all a big balancing act. But one thing of flipping that neck out is we just moved our support point from there to there on the front. Now if we're going off of mid-span between the two support points, yeah, we can get a shot. From here to now way up here is our support point. We're getting back pretty close to center of the deck is where we put our load, and it splits the weight fairly evenly. Now if I'm trying to run without this single axle Jeep in here and just as the tractor, and I'm heavy on the tractor, I can flip that neck out just to move that support point out, which is going to transfer more of the weight back here. Now in a lot of situations, that's all I'm going to have to do to get the weight transferred back to these axles. But if we're still getting heavier on weights, we can throw that Jeep in the mix. And now we essentially just made this truck a 2+1 in most states, or a triaxle group in others. Now, like I said, if this was a lightweight front end truck, we would slide that fifth wheel back center over the drives, and that would put this Jeep 12 feet behind those truck axles. Over 10 feet in a lot of states gets it kind of counted on its own as a separate deal. And now we have, say, 40, like I said, it varies so much depending on the state. So say 40,000 plus another 20,000, or 46 plus another 20. All depends on where you're at. But this just made this whole setup a whole lot more versatile in what I could do by adding that single axle Jeep in the mix and ditching that big huge tandem axle Jeep over there. And also the fact that I found an Aspen Jeep of the exact same year and exact same model as the Aspen trailer I already had, within driving distance, turnkey, ready to go, aside from throwing a few bolts in it, like brand new brakes, tires, airbags, not an air leak in it. Like, I found that setup within driving distance that matches my trailer exactly perfect right down to the year. I kind of had to buy it. And now we're red, white, and blue going down the road all at the same time. So now we're going to answer the question of why didn't I just get a 4-axle truck? And we're going to answer another question a lot of you guys asked, was could you just swap the Jeeps between these two trailers, since this Jeep has the short neck, which doesn't let me load my front end, because could I just use the other one in its place? And we will get to that. Okay, so why didn't I get a 4-axle truck, which is, you know, it's your 2 drive axles and then a drop axle right here, which is basically this setup but permanently, and you wouldn't have to monkey around with all that? Well, the answer is very simple, because I didn't want one. The reason I didn't want one, the main reason, length. I already have a super long truck. The whole point of this was to be much shorter, more maneuverable, and get under length limits. To have a 4th axle in here, you have to be a certain distance away from the axle behind it and a certain distance away from the axle in front of it to get your bridge weights right. Now, that means this whole truck would have to be extended, and you end up basically with the other truck that I already have. And that would be too long for most of what I want to do, because this truck here, hooked to either the Aspen with the long tandem axle Jeep in front, or hooked to the Cozad here, I can get under 105 feet total length front to back. And now in most states I'm going to be running these trailers in, or do run these trailers in, 105 feet is the lower limit of needing a pilot car purely for length. Of course, if you're wide, loaded a lot, you need pilot cars, but Utah, Oregon, I believe, a few others want a pilot car for anything over 105 feet total, even when you're empty. And by being able to get under 105, I can eliminate that big expense. The other thing is, in Oregon, your annual permit, so we get every load I haul on these trailers I have to permit. But in Oregon as well. I have the permit for California too, an annual unladen permit. Unladen, I don't care how you say it, I say it how I say it. But that basically allows me to take these trailers, either one of these trailers, anywhere I want to go in the state of Oregon or California, because I got both those permits. We're working on Nevada, that should come in soon. But without needing to get any extra permits. It's an annual permit that allows me to get them to the load and then home from the load, just under one single annual permit. And then you still have to permit the load in between, but I need to take this to the shop to get maintenance done. I don't have to get a separate permit for that, I already have it. But in Oregon, that permit is limited to 105 feet. So if I had a longer truck, I would still have to get a permit for every single trip I do with these trailers. And that would mean I would have to get a separate permit to get to the load, a permit to haul the load, and a permit to get home from the load every single time. And that makes no sense when I have this truck right here that can get me under 105 with each of these trailers. And that was another big consideration in the length of these trailers when I was looking at them, is both of them were able to get me under 105 feet, which is very important. Now also, when I'm pulling a normal low bed, not these big ones, just a normal low bed, having this shorter truck can get me under 65 feet, which is when I go down into California, or actually a lot of places around here in Oregon too. Most of where I want to go and things I want to do, you have a 65-foot overall length limit to not need any permits. You can permit beyond that for big stuff like this, but to just generally haul, go, pull in a flatbed trailer like that, you have a 65-foot limit in a lot of places, especially where I want to go in California. And having this shorter truck lets me be under that 65. I had a long enough truck to effectively use a drop axle and get the full weights on it, and that was way up there. I wouldn't be able to get under 65 anymore with my other trailers, so that is another reason for tandem axle truck. Finally, the reason for tandem axle truck is weight table 5 in Oregon. Weight table 4, and as far as most people generally know, in the state of Oregon, on a set of tandem axles, you get 43,000 pounds on this group. So the most you can weigh here, 43,000 pounds, 43,000 pounds, 43, 43, and that's as much as you get. In California, actually I just got my annual permit for California for this thing, 22,000, 47,338, that's not a tandem, but this is 46,725, 46,725, 46,725. Now obviously in either of those states, if I had a longer truck with the drop axle in it and got it California certified and all that, you would increase the amount of weight you could get on this whole group, because it'd be a tri-group, much like we have right now. But in Oregon, there's also weight table 5, and weight table 5 has some variances in it. And one of the things in weight table 5 is if you have 4 consecutive sets of tandem axles, you're allowed 48,000 per group. So when this truck as a tandem is hooked to either of these trailers, with obviously the full Jeep in here, not this one, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 consecutive sets of tandems all in a row. So instead of being limited to 43 here, they allow you to go up to 48. Now granted, the permit takes a little longer to get because they have to route clearance you on the weights and all that stuff like that, but you just significantly increased the amount of weight you can put on both of these trailers by having a tandem axle truck. Now I know what you're going to say, well, if you have the drop, just leave the drop up. You can't do that. I believe in the state of Oregon, and I know for a fact in most other states, if you're overweight, all your lift axles, drop axles, whatever, have to be down and deployed, which makes this no longer 4 consecutive sets of tandem axles. It makes it only 3 consecutive sets of tandems, which puts that whole loophole out the window. And then even on weight table 5, you're limited to 21,500. I think it's 58 in this group if you have the tandem 20,000 pound drop and the correct spacings and all that. But then you cut down to 43, 43, 43 instead of 48, 48, 48, 48. And it really limits what you can do and what you can haul. So by not having a drop on this truck, I get more axle capacity all the way across, which makes no freaking sense at all, but that's the way it works. Now I would really love for someone from like the bridge department or weights civil engineer, whatever, from the state of Oregon to explain to me how putting 48,000 pounds on this group of axles right here is too much weight for Oregon roads and bridges and will damage them, unless you do it a whole bunch of times in a row and then it's magically okay. I don't understand that. The same within California, we have the 16 tire trailers, the low beds. It's 2 axles like this, but there's also another set of duals on the inside, another set of duals on the outside set. So you have 8 tires per axle, and they spread out to 10 feet wide on that. And in California, on that set of tandem axles on the trailer, we're allowed 60,000 pounds, where anywhere else you have to have a tri-axle trailer to get 60,000 pounds on the trailer. And now those trailers, they're allowed in Oregon, they just don't get any extra weight. They still get 43 on the tandem, just like this would. But I don't quite understand the logic in that one either, because one, those trailers have 16 tires spreading out the same amount of weight that an Oregon trailer only has 12. And 2, you're spreading that weight out across the whole lane because they're 10 feet wide and they're 8 tires per axle. So when you're driving in roads and they have like the grooves in them where the tires always ride, well, on a tri-axle trailer, it's putting 60,000 pounds right in those grooves. The 16 tire spreads it out across the whole road, kind of counteracting the grooves, and if anything, helps like flatten them out some. But they're not allowed here unless you go back to weight table 5 and have 3 consecutive sets of 16 tire groups in a row. So again, a California style 16 tire trailer is not allowed. Well, it doesn't get any extra weight. It gets the 43,000 just like a normal tandem axle trailer would get, unless it's a triple 16 9 axle. So say this one, 16 tire group, 16 tire group, 16 tire group. So again, you go back to 16 tire group here with 60,000 pounds on it is not okay. You can't take it down Oregon roads because it will damage and hurt the roads unless you do it 3 times in a row, and then it's magically okay. But to be fair, I think you actually get 58,000, not 60 in that setup, but still a lot more than 43. And again, that one doesn't exactly make sense to me, but it is the way it is. So those are the rules we got to play with. And that's why I have the 2 setups that I have that play within those rules the way I want to. Now, as far as the jump Jeep here and where it's legal, where it's not, from as far as I know, these get extra weight in every single state except California. California won't allow them or give any extra weight on them. And I believe it's the only state that doesn't. Every other one I believe does. But this particular one stretches out to 12 feet from that axle to that axle. And now here's where it gets interesting. When I incorrectly measured this trailer, because I had my 5th wheel slid up, and got the California inspection report for it, I submitted the inspection report with the 5th wheel slid up wrong measurements, and I only had 12 feet from the truck axle to the Jeep axle, exactly the same as that one, and they permitted it. Totally fine, no problem. Granted, they brought the weights down of the whole group because I was technically short coupled, but what I did was shorted myself on the steer axle, which gave me weight back on the drive axles, and I kind of got most of my weight as if I had a light duty front end truck, and they gave me what I wanted here with a 12-foot spacing. So if they're okay with the 12-foot spacing here, why would they not be okay with the 12-foot spacing here? Because when you slide this back, it makes this 12 feet. So I'm gonna try and submit an inspection report for this setup with a 12-foot spacing, and then I'm gonna call them, and I'm gonna use a tactic that has worked for me in the past with California's permit service and Caltrans, and that is where you call them up, you give them all your info, what you're doing, and then what you say, it's a secret code word, pretty please. And I've gotten the pretty please before, and they've let me do something I didn't think they were gonna let me do, and on paper they probably shouldn't have, but I got it. So we're gonna try and we'll see how that goes. Now, also looking at these 2 things right here, one thing I said is this might raise my 5th wheel up high enough that this trailer would work with this Jeep and be able to get into more places. And looking right now with the tower all the way up, we're probably 6 inches higher. The camera looks, see, if you look at it from over here, it looks fairly even. If you look at it from over here, it looks way off. That's like a weird optical illusion happening right now. But I'm betting we're 6 inches higher right here, so take 1.5 blocks out, and we've still got tons of deck height to work with here. So yes, I could ditch this Jeep and run this instead, but I wouldn't have the tower advantage, so I would kind of always be extra tall which is not ideal because the whole thing with this is you can bring the deck down nice and low to get your height down and then raise it to clear stuff. So yes, I can pull this trailer with this Jeep instead of this one. I probably won't, but I can. Now the other question was, where is it at? It's over here. Since this Jeep is long enough to load the front end of this truck, can I just run that Jeep with this trailer instead, or can I swap the Jeeps between the two? And the answer is no. I cannot use the other Jeep to pull this trailer, because even with this down on the ground, this neck is still like this high. And if we look over here, whoa, there's a big Navy jet, Air Force, one of the two. What's that say on the side? Air Force or Navy? I can't read it with my eyes, but I will zoom in on the camera. Either way, you see how low the fifth wheel is on that Jeep? It's actually even lower than the one on my truck, which gets this up just barely high enough to pull it down the road. So no, we cannot use that Jeep with this neck, because that is not an adjustable neck and that is not an adjustable Jeep. But we can, however, use this trailer with this Jeep, because this is a hydraulic neck. So you would have the tower and you would have the hydraulic neck, and it would allow you to do all kinds of crazy up and down movements with that deck. But we will never do that, because this Jeep is the part that limits you. So there'd be no point in hooking that trailer to this Jeep, because it would still limit you on weight, unless I needed to clear some crazy high obstacle with the middle of the deck. Then by putting this hydraulic neck in conjunction with this hydraulic tower right here, I could probably get that deck like 4 or 5 feet off the ground. So yes, you technically can, there's just not much point to it. Well, I should probably mention that this Jeep also has a sliding fifth wheel that slides a hell of a lot farther than that little one does. But same thing, you can adjust where the fifth wheel sits on here to adjust how much weight it puts back here in relation to up there to the truck. So depending on your truck configuration, you can adjust with this slider. So now, in addition to just using this with the different configurations of this trailer right here, you can use this with a normal triaxle trailer as well, you know, like no booster, just a rigid triaxle trailer. And you've essentially just turned this into a 4-axle truck with a triaxle trailer, and then you're a 7-axle setup, which is what's very common, especially here in the Pacific Northwest, but most of the low bed world. And then when I want to do something like that, I can. And then when I don't, I ditch that and I'm back to a short tandem axle tractor, which is what I want for the majority of what I do. So this piece just adds a huge amount of versatility to this truck, or any other truck that doesn't happen to have that big front end. Still gives you a good weight capacity back here. And for where it was, the condition it's in, and the price I got it for, incredibly versatile piece of equipment that like I couldn't really pass up. But an issue with it, as you can imagine, this is a tricky little setup to back up with this in the middle. That big Jeep over there, far easier than backing up this, but this one has a trick up its sleeve, and it happens to do with these D-rings right here. So I will now show you that. Now, if I was doing this for real and going down the road, I would have either chained or strapped that axle up. Well, first I would have opened this, dumped the airbags. Oh, you guys are getting evicted for sure. But open that, dump the airbags, collapse this down, brought that neck down even farther, put the chains on, and then either chain or strap the axle up so it's not hanging from the bags. Sitting still, it's not gonna hurt it, but bouncing down the road, you don't wanna do that. But you see, we got plenty of height, and that could come up probably up to that high if those bags were collapsed and chained up. But now we just eliminated the Jeep here, basically made it rigid with the trailer, and we can back this up. If we pin that booster straight like we do to back up, now we back this up as one rigid trailer with no pivot points in between. Or say we're going down the highway empty, we can lift that off the ground so it's no longer in the mix, and you can go down the road like this, exactly what it's meant to do. Or if you're trying to get up like a loose gravel road, a hill or something like that, you can do that same thing to eliminate all the weight off of that and put it on your drives right here and get yourself more traction. So that is why it's called a jump Jeep. But technically, to be a jump Jeep, it should have rollers right here on the frame that when I slide my fifth wheel up, catch this and go up that and lift it up that way, and the trailer still pivots off of here, and those rollers kind of just sit locked into your frame. This one doesn't have them, which, like I said, is what I want, because I want to be able to run my fifth wheel all the way up to put that weight up on my front end while still being able to turn, not eliminating the turn. So that is how that works. And yes, you can do the same thing with this Jeep right here to get yourself extra traction. Not loaded, that's empty, of course. To get yourself extra traction up a hill, back up with basically a rigid trailer, or just to go down the road empty and not be running the Jeep. Just, you would use the holes back here because it doesn't have D-rings on the side, and you'd have to chain these axles up. But this can do, or does it have? No, it does not have limit chains. Some of these have limit chains specifically for doing that. This one does not. So, but you can still do the same thing. I could pick this up and hang the Jeep and drive all down the road I want if I just don't want the Jeep involved. I have done that when I blew a tire on a Jeep. Not this one, obviously, it was a Cozad. I blew a tire on a Jeep and I was like 4 hours from home, very tired, wanted to go home, and just didn't want to deal with that shit today. So I hung the Jeep, I took off down the road, I went through the scales with the Jeep hanging from the neck like that, with the shredded blown tire on the scale side. They didn't say a thing. Technically legal as can be, as far as I know. Blown tire doesn't matter if it's not on the ground, and there's nothing that says tires have to be on the ground. So that is that. Oh, also real quick, let me show you one more thing you can do with this setup if you want to get creative enough. This right here, flip neck, is pinned top and bottom, meaning you can completely remove it, and that piece right there comes out as well, so that it's just this neck piece that has a kingpin in it. And if you want to haul bridge beams, I've done this in the past, hauling bridges, bridge beams, stuff like that, big steel beams, you can put this, just this piece, in the fifth wheel of your truck and use that as your front bunk plate for the load to sit on, and then you chain it to it, and then you put a dolly all the way under the back. And the dolly, I had a radio control steerable 3-axle dolly that I used. You could steer it from radio control in the truck, and then that was what went into your kingpin and the load chain to where it could turn and move. And you had super long air and electric lines that ran all the way back to the dolly, and then the dolly chained to the back of it, and then the beam was your trailer. And if it's heavier, you could use this Jeep with this setup and essentially have a triaxle group on your truck to haul an even heavier beam. And if it gets even heavier than that, you would take that same flip neck piece. There goes that jet again. Better not be circling my house. But you could put that same flip neck in that Jeep and have even more capacity, but more likely in that case, you would put that flip neck in this Jeep so that you'd have the hydraulic power tower and could lift the front up higher and be able to overhang the front. This tire needs to come off of here. It doesn't actually fit anything I own. But then the beam could be up here, or it could be back there, and you'd have height adjustment. So that flip neck in the fifth wheel of the truck, that flip neck in this fifth wheel with this Jeep, or that flip neck in that power tower Jeep here when you want to get really crazy, and then a dolly at the back, which again, this trailer, you could take all of this out, get rid of the whole deal, put that flip neck off of the Aspen in the Cozad power tower, and then you unpin the rear off of here. And I don't have the other top plate, but essentially imagine just this piece here that this is welded to. Get rid of that. It's just this piece that pins in here so it can pivot, and it has chain points all the way around it, and that's the rear bunk plate for the big beam. And then your big long beam has a steerable dolly under the back end of it that you can raise up and down on height. So with what I have sitting in this yard right now, I have some incredibly versatile options. This is out because I had to measure to see how wide the outrigger bores needed to be. The ones I have are too wide, I had to cut them down. But yeah, tandem axle truck, tri-axle truck, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, technically 10 axle trailer if I wanted it to be. Multiple configurations of beam, bunk, dolly, steerable, booster. You can get kind of, your imagination is your limitation here, and what the permit people let you do. but if you imagine and get creative enough in your permit to request, you can get a lot of things approved, I found out. But either way, that's how all that works. Well, there we are, all hooked back up as a 9-axle, which is how it will be run the vast majority of the time. But with that one simple piece, I just gained a ton of options in how I can use this setup, making it that much more versatile. So this has been another episode of Casey Talks About His Trailers. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. And as an extra bonus to close all this out, my trucks are red, white, and blue as well.